In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, you are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm Richard.
And I'm David, and welcome back to our newest discussion in the lobby. This week we are chatting with Mark De Grasse, the host of the Dads in Autismland podcast. Welcome to the lobby, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
So some of our listeners might not be familiar, and David, you've gotten to have a conversation with Mark already, which I got the treat of listening to. It was really good. But for those that aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, Mark?
Sure. I'm the host of a podcast called Dads in Autismland. Basically, we try to connect with fathers of all autistic kids, but we end up in the more severe kind of segment. And it's been amazing. We've actually done 26 episodes. I'm actually producing like a short book from all the input and stories. So we're moving. It's been great.
That's awesome.
I
didn't know about
really
the book.
Awesome.
That's really great news.
I actually came from print, so I'm always like, hey, a magazine or a book. You can do either way.
There you go. Yeah, I had the privilege of chatting and being on Mark's podcast a couple weeks ago as we're recording this, further ago when you hear it. But so that was tons of fun getting to discuss what life is like when you're an autism parent, which actually brings us to our other regular host, Richard. And I said, I got to get Richard back for this one because I knew if we're going to talk about special needs and in particular autism in film, I wanted all of us to kind of have more of a personal investment in that. And Richard, I not to put you on the spot, but this is something you have a bit of experience with, right?
Yeah. So with my son, I honestly, I think with two of my sons, but it's kind of, it's hard to talk about those things sometimes and be sure what you're seeing and what you're dealing with. One's younger, so it's that sort of that way. But yeah, Rory in particular, who I love, amazing. He deals with these issues, and I feel like I might be kind of the odd one out because I feel like he might be a little bit on the less severe side than maybe what you guys are dealing with, which I'm very thankful for. Yeah. But he definitely has his rituals, and he has his things that we've just learned as a family that you skirt around and you make allowances for and things like that. It's a different thing, and I feel like it's hard for people that don't have interaction with it regularly to really understand some of the stuff that you're doing and going through. So it's good to talk with other dads that are dealing with the same stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone's situation's a bit unique, but we can all, I guess, relate to the idea of just parenting being different for us than it is for the average person. Mark, do you maybe want to fill us in a little bit about your family, your parenting journey, as
Sure.
we kind of give our audience an idea, because people have their preconceptions about autism, which is part of what we're going to discuss today. But yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure. I have two sons, 12 and 13. They're only 10 months apart. So it's a even more unique situation where we essentially had two kids that were Irish twins. Yeah. And my older son, the 13-year-old, he has severe autism or profound autism, whatever you want to call it. And we started that journey around like 16 or 18 months. Basically, when my younger son was born, we were able to kind of compare the two, where it was like, oh, hey, here's the milestones for my younger son and then the milestones for my older son, and they did not align. So our situation was a little unique. And then we had to figure it out. And nobody we knew really had dealt with the journey. So it was pretty lonely. And what I found was with, like you were saying, Richard, it's like you could relate to other parents, but it's still unique and you can't handle things the same way. And as you're getting into it, you really realize like, oh, people have their expectations of like, you need to be this parent. You should,
particularly in Christian circles. In Christian circles, you're going to run into that a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, you have the more conservative and they have their expectations of children. And we had like the way we were parented when we were kids. We're like, we tried to explain this to my neurotypical son. We're like, when we were your age, like our opinions were never wanted ever.
Irrelevant.
You were not allowed to talk or go in rooms in the house.
Yes.
And then you look back at our, my childhood, I was like, holy crap, that was not very healthy. Like what the heck was going on back then? But yeah, it's been a great journey. My son, Damien, has taught us so much. He's nonverbal. He's very severe. He's, we're still potty training. We've been potty training for 5 years now. I mean, on and off since he was like 3 or 4. It's still going. So that's like our goal in life is like he can use the bathroom and we don't have to deal with that anymore. So it's a little bit different. And then my other son, it's kind of funny because he has some autism traits too, like OCD, and he's a perfectionist and he's kind of neurotic about some things. So it's kind of like a different mix. But he's very special too in terms of like straight A student and super baseball player and he has to win at everything. It's interesting.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like quite a dynamic being able to just kind of draw that comparison directly between boys of similar age. But yeah, as one thing we discussed on the Dads in Autismland podcast, which you guys should definitely go check out. I would honestly say go ahead and pause this one, go check out his podcast, and then get back to ours whenever you get around to it. After you share,
different
subscribe,
topic,
all of that stuff. Yeah, that vastly different. Well, obviously we're bridging the gap here a bit, but one of the things we discussed, my son is actually in a very similar situation to Mark's son Damien. So it was really neat to be able to connect on that because even in the autism dad community, there's so much variation, such tremendous variation, and that's one of the hallmarks of that community. And so when I heard your podcast and heard how similar your situation was to mine, I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Don't get that all
you feel alone. It's like, I think that's the biggest thing I realized talking to the dads is that you just feel completely alone and you can't really, we're not really taught to talk about it. It's kind of like, hey, it's your struggle. It's your personal situation. Like you don't want to bother anybody about it. And so you end up just being alone. And what I found is I'm like, no, you're totally not alone. Right. And we just have to talk about it a little bit. And then you'll find your people and you'll be a lot happier.
I think a lot of times for us as men too, like sometimes it's just people put that on you. Like you don't want to talk about your problems. That's your thing. But we also do that a little bit to ourselves. I feel like most of us don't want pity or sympathy really. We just want people to feel like we've got it together and everything is great. And please don't ask any more questions about it. At least that's for me. So like only in certain contexts do you really talk about it because it's something you don't want to air a lot of times.
Yeah, well, and even the advice, it's like if you have a child with autism, everybody has, it's the diet, and my friend tried this, and it totally, and now they're graduated from MIT. Like I hear that story a shocking amount of time. Oh, they didn't talk until they were 2.5. I'm like, okay, that's great. Yeah, I know that's difficult.
I don't know if you've done an episode on this or not, but I think a helpful episode would be like. Things not to say or like less helpful things that we hear.
Because, like, hey, if we're smiling at you like this, it's you probably crossed some line. Just stop.
I mean, and like, the whole, I know someone who didn't talk until they were 4 and now they're such and such. And it's like, cool, kids are unique.
Everybody's unique, but it's, there's a big, paradox between like the superhero autism and then the actually severe handicap autism, and and there's fights about it. It's even like with some of the policy changes with the new administration, like people are offended by it, like RFK can't say that this is a difficult situation because I'm autistic and I'm a doctor and all this stuff, and they're like We're not talking about you guys.
Right.
I mean, not that that's not difficult as well, but it's completely different.
Yeah, exactly. It's suddenly, yeah, that was a whole strange thing. That it suddenly became a majorly politically and socially aligned thing. How you talk about autism, I was like, man, that came out of nowhere. I didn't have that on my 2025 bingo card.
There's a large segment where if you speak about it in any way other than it's this amazing blessing and thank goodness, then you get a lot of pushback on it. And like, it makes me wonder sometimes, like, are these people that have dealt with it? You know, I don't know if they're taking it as that it's criticism of your own child and how dare you or that sort of thing. But yeah, there's difficulty. I feel like it's okay to acknowledge that there is difficulty about it. Sure, there's things about it that make them extra special too, but that's not the whole picture all the time.
Well, yeah, that's parenthood in general, right? I mean, like if you say anything negative about what it's like to have children, you know, and somebody took that to say, well, kids are great. It's like, yeah, I know. Also that. Like,
I'm not talking about that part.
Right.
I need advice is what I need for.
And
for
they're all different too. Like you were saying how you were noticing the differences once you had the next child and you're seeing the difference in the way they developed and things. Like everyone has a different situation too. Because for me, my firstborn was super advanced, started talking way early, walking super early, very like emotionally intelligent, interacting. And we thought that was normal. So with each kid after that, we kept thinking they were behind, something was wrong. And then the doctor was like, no, your first kid was just kind of ahead. There's nothing wrong. You're fine. So then when we got to Rory, it was like, okay, we've been through this 2 times now where they kept telling us, no, it's fine. So we were chilled about it until we're getting to like 3 and 4 years old, and he's got like one word that he says repeatedly. I'm like, well, what's happened here? You know, what went on?
That's almost harder because we know a bunch of families like that too, where it's like, oh, they had like 4 kids and all the kids are totally fine, and then their 5th was autistic, and they're like, you know, and then it's a completely different situation, which also throws things off because you're like, okay, I haven't done this before, and I'm missing the stuff that I usually do. So
yeah,
it's almost more difficult.
Well, and to Richard's point earlier, I think one of the things that kind of messes with your assessment in the early days of trying to figure out, you know, is your child autistic or not, is comparison to other autistic kids sometimes. And so Richard was coming over, we were recording weekly episodes, and, you know, he was getting to know our son, Edison, who is pretty severely autistic.
Yes.
And so I don't know, I guess we've never talked about this, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was a sense in which you were looking at Rory being like, well, he's not like Eddie. So, right. You know.
And there was with the comparison between them two as well, it really felt like there was a point at which I thought that could be Rory. Like Rory's not picking up speech very well. He's not communicating his needs very well. A lot of things that you would deal with. But for some reason, during COVID, I don't know why, Rory had an explosion. I would be that one that would probably like frustrate other because we're like, he hit 4 and then everything was great. And now he's going to MIT, you know, because he kind of is that kid. He talks constantly now. And that's, you have to almost check yourself because he'll talk and talk and talk. And you're like, oh my gosh, please, for a second, just, but then you're like, no, because he wasn't talking at all. I'm really glad. He'll tell you, he will tell me all of the states in alphabetical order without taking a breath. And I didn't even know he could do that until he just came to me and did it like 2 weeks ago.
That's
I said, Dad, did you know I can do this? And he just rattles it out. I'm like, what in the world? But this kid, he was hardly talking, I swear, at 4 years old, like almost nothing. So it's just, it was different. There was a point at which I thought that might be his trajectory. And then he just sort of had a turn that happened, you know, which I'm thankful for. But he still clearly is dealing with the same issues. He still has a lot of the same things have to be done a certain way. There's things that don't make sense to anyone else. I get it because I see him struggle with it all the time. But other people are like, why are you doing it this way for? I'm like, listen, I have to. You don't understand.
Yeah.
You don't understand what's going to happen if I don't do it this way for him. So a lot of stuff like that. But it is interesting because I felt like at one point him and your child were not too far off from one another. And then there was sort of like a turn.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole journey. Like, and I know this is one of the things, Mark, that you guys discuss on your podcast is like, what was the process of getting diagnosed, or for that matter, just coming to grips with your child's situation? What was that process like? And I think that alone is a journey, you know, that it's the beginning, right? But it's in and of itself, it's its own journey to just, assessing how the rest of the world works. And you know, we've had a lot of other people like, even within our family that have children with special needs, and it's easy for them to look at their child and compare to our son and be like, well, he's not as severe as Eddie. And it's like, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean like,
it's not difficult.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean it's not difficult. It doesn't mean that they're not autistic. It's just that it is a spectrum after all. If you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, right?
Totally.
That's about as much as we can truly generalize, at least us lay people, I suppose you could say. But I'm glad that we are having this discussion, and especially as we turn our direction towards the popcorn theology angle here, because I think a lot of the reasons for the perceptions that we have about special needs, in particular autism, has to do with the portrayal in the media. But before we get to that, Mark, one thing we always like to ask our guests is, what's your favorite movie? I know you're a bit of a film lover yourself. And so do you have a favorite film or a favorite couple films?
Sure. I really like this movie, The Fountain. It was actually, I think it was like the mid 2000s, a sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi.
Is that the one
fan.
with Rachel Weisz and I'm trying to think.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of the actor's name that was in it.
It's basically like three. Yeah, it's one of those guy actors that you see in everything, and then you're like, I don't actually know his name. But it's like basically the story. Yeah, exactly. But he's traveling to this, the supernova that's going to go off in this weird spaceship that looks like a bubble, and he goes through this whole Zen experience, and the cinematography is awesome, but then the soundtrack is amazing, and so I'm really big in like epic moments, and so they have a bunch of these in this movie. That and Fifth Element, of course, which is nice, kind of a classic.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm into the sci-fi. And I used to be so into movies, but like the last 10 years has been fairly dry, like maybe 15 years where I'm like, man, because I got into movies back in the 90s when it was just like you had like The Matrix and
peaked in the
Jurassic Park.
We peaked in the 90s. The Matrix was right about that when it said we peaked in the 90s.
Yeah, it's like
that's why they based it on the right. It really was. We didn't know what we had. We didn't.
Well, it's even The Matrix. It's like the sequels to The Matrix were trash in my opinion, and it was just like, man, that one story was so good.
Yep.
Oh, now it's now it's a Fight Club. I mean, just like these.
Now you're talking David's language.
Yeah, that's probably
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Like,
that's a wild one. Yeah.
Yeah, just all these movies but even I actually when I was trying to get into the internet when that was new, I had a website called SciFi Soup where I would review movies from sci-fi movies from the 50s on, and so I actually watched a bunch of like movies from the 70s, Soylent Green, and even like the 80s, the Escape from LA, things like that, and I was like, man, the movies used to be really good. And then greed took over. That's usually how it works. But those two kind of stand out. I used to watch them just repeatedly.
Wow. That's a good sign. Rewatchability. Yeah.
Yes.
Something you can enjoy over and over again. We should have you back to do a sci-fi episode. I think that would be loads of fun.
I would love that. Yeah, I got lots of input on that.
Nice.
I'm not a Star Wars fan. I'm going to warn you because a lot of people get offended by that, where I'm like, Star Wars is just it has zero consistency.
Is it too mainstream for you? Is it like
it's
are you like a sci-fi
mainstream
hipster about this, or
no? It doesn't have to do with anybody liking it. It's the story itself and the inconsistency of the technology
even in the original trilogy, like just as a standalone thing.
Even in the original, it's just like, well, because
I would like to have that conversation, but that's not for today.
Fight.
I'm very curious. It's not a fight. I just genuinely am curious.
No, it's just like I don't know. They just the way lightsabers work, how they explain the Force and the Sith, and then they are not consistent on how technology works. I'm like a sci-fi opera. It's like a genre or a subgenre of written books, and it's all about consistency. It's like, and you see it in movies like Alien. It's like you have consistent tech. You could only travel through space like this, and then there you go. And there's rules. But anyway, Star Wars violates all of them and then just decides stuff. Oh, look, the one captain used the ship as a missile by going, light speed instantly.
That was horrible.
Nobody would have thought of that.
Let's not take the low-hanging fruit. That was horrible.
You won't make too many enemies critiquing that one.
They drop bombs in space. Like, what? How would that work?
I was like, how are they falling? That's not how that works.
Oh, I think you go into
Listen,
like orbital mechanics and you're
This
like,
is not
okay,
what
so
Star Wars is for, though. Star Wars isn't for that. It's for whatever will make the plot move. It's like Doctor Who in that way. Doctor Who just changes the rules every episode, and you just kind of have to embrace
dimensions.
it. You got to embrace it.
This is very
You
amusing
can't
for me.
embrace this one.
This is very amusing for me because I have some information about Richard that Mark doesn't know.
Oh, what's that?
What's that?
Richard already has it. You seem surprised. Which is that one of your children is named after a Star Wars character, and not to throw you under the bus too much, but it's even a Star Wars sequel.
It's a sequel character. We took it because we thought it was a cute name for a boy, though. It's really not. It's not that I loved that character that much, or
well,
it's not
and certainly
Obi-Wan
given the
or
way
something.
that this plot progresses, you wouldn't. It makes sense to not have your child named after.
We named him Kylo, which is kind of crazy considering Kylo kills his father. And
everybody.
I didn't really think that through when I did that. But
Well, my son's named Damien. I always get the the Omen talk about Damien. My parents, especially my mom, like, oh my gosh, Damien. I'm like, I was actually a saint from Hawaii that took care of lepers. So
see, showing my other guilty pleasure, Damien is the snake that Jake the Snake Roberts used to bring to the ring in WWF in the 80s.
There you go.
So there's another possible reference for the name.
Boom. That's awesome. So, Mark, it sounds like you're more of a hard sci-fi guy, right? Or is there another term for it?
No, hard sci-fi.
Hard
That's
sci-fi.
the term. Yeah, and then sci-fi opera. That's just like
space opera, space cowboys,
space opera.
Perfect.
No, not really space cowboy. It's like the culture series. Like Elon Musk, that's what his drone ships are named after. Spaceships from this one series, and the series is nuts. But what I actually learned recently is that a lot of these authors, they practice esotericism, and it's in the books all over the place. I never really realized until I started learning about that segment of belief, and I'm like, holy crap, I am very well educated in this just from fiction. So it's interesting. I think people use sci-fi to talk about stuff that would be taboo to say. But if it's sci-fi, then it's like, oh, no, this is just fictional.
Yes.
It's in the future.
You see that a lot.
It's not real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to say things without saying things, Get canceled.
Change a couple of terms, add some, other groups and other planets in there. Yeah, you can get away with throwing a lot of ideas out there. Definitely sounds like an episode we need to schedule down the road.
Yes.
But before we get into before we get too far into the Star Trek, or excuse me, oh gosh, you got me thinking Star Trek because of the futurism there. But in terms of this episode, we're mostly talking about the portrayal of special needs in films and TV, which I would say is almost exclusively about autism, although there are, some other, developmental disabilities
that's a pretty big junk drawer of a term. There's some other things out there too, but you definitely see a lot of autism.
Well, and maybe that's a good starting point. Is what are some other, disabilities besides physical disabilities that we see portrayed in film? And I guess we could even, some even take umbrage with the term disability when applied to this. One that comes to mind is Down syndrome. There's a film Peanut Butter Falcon, which is gorgeous.
I wanted to watch that. I never watched that, and I wanted to.
Yeah,
it's something that's been on my radar for a while.
It's quite good. It's got Shia LaBeouf, and I forget the main character's name, but he obviously has Down syndrome. Not something you can, fake necessarily. And it's very well made. It's kind of a bit of a coming of age adventure type story, almost reminiscent a little bit of Huckleberry Finn to a degree. But anyway, I would recommend it. We did an episode way back when on it. But a lot of movies, they'll have a character with special needs, and they don't say autism, but it seems evident from the symptoms and the lack of saying autism that it's probably autism based on the setting. I mean, are there any that come to mind for you guys that are focused on autism, or for that matter, anything else?
Actually, what just popped up in my head was Something About Mary, where it's like Mary's, I think her older brother.
He didn't like his ears being touched, right? If I remember right, he had headphones all the time.
Touched. Yep. Huh. And that was like a point. And he got violent when something, somebody touched his ears, and it was like a big deal. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was definitely autism.
It's funny how things were looked at differently then, because I don't think it was ever said, like it wouldn't have said autism or even any kind of term like that. And it was for comedic relief only. Like, it was such a different thing.
Yeah, but even then, it was kind of like a sweet thing because
because she very much cared for the brother, and and I think she realized how some people were because of how they treated the brother and things. So I guess there was that aspect to it too.
It wasn't a punchline, but it was in a comedic element.
It was. Well, it was kind of like a character development arc because it's just like, this, woman who everybody desires, and she's actually very caring with her sibling. And I was like, oh, that's actually, very humanizing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
I was thinking of like you see OCD in a lot of things. People that struggle and usually again that's often comedic in different ways. Like Monk comes to mind, some of his nuances and things. So you've seen. I'm trying to think about. I know I've seen that in other things, and Monk is the one that's like just flashing in my head.
Yeah, I would say along the same lines. I mean, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory is a little OCD, a little autistic, but mostly convenient to whatever the plot needs.
Yeah.
I think they play fast and loose with that.
Well, even the times that they did that in, because now you look back at some of those original episodes of Big Bang Theory, and you're like, man, these guys are pretty sexist and a whole bunch of other bad things, chauvinist and just brutal in a lot of different ways, especially to like women or people they saw inferior. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that portrayal. Although a lot of autistic people don't actually tolerate autistic people very well. And that's, that actually shows up a little bit there. Not on purpose, I don't think. But yeah, it's interesting. And you got the long-term effect too, because it's not like, I know we're going to talk about like Tropic Thunder, where it's like, that was the character, Simple Jack. It was Simple Jack.
Yeah, Simple Jack.
Simple Jack. Yeah. And then, and that was a punchline there.
Yeah.
And now I can't watch that movie anymore. Like I used to, I think when I was actually in Kauai when they shot that, or recently after. So I saw where they blew up all those trees. And I was like, oh, this is so neat. That's, that's the spot. And now I look at the movie and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I can't, And even watching the shows, like I've tried to watch The Good Doctor, and the main character has autism, and it's hard. It's like I can't. If it touches too close to home, then I'm like, this is not enjoyable for me. So
yeah,
it's bad.
It is funny because having a child with autism, a lot of people recommend shows and movies to you. I'm guessing you guys maybe encountered this some as well. They're like, oh, you should check out what's it called, The Amazing Attorney Woo. There's a lot of Korean dramas and or Korean shows and movies that are centered around autism. And at a certain point, you're like, I mean, I'm interested in this, but I also kind of want to watch movies to like not escape per se, but like if this is your life, maybe you want to do something slightly different when it comes to entertainment. I agree. Even in some of the movies I rewatched for this episode, I was like, man, this was heavy to watch because it's so much more personal now than it was when I watched it years ago. It's like, oh yeah, some people are like that. But yeah, you mentioned Tropic Thunder on an episode of your podcast, in particular in reference to the way that we talk about people with special needs. And so I'm curious, do you want to maybe just kind of fill everyone in a bit on that?
Yeah. So, Tropic Thunder, they had a character that one of the actors plays. Ben Stiller's character played Simple Jack, where it's basically like a movie where he's special needs. I think they portray him as Down syndrome, maybe, or not. Probably not Down syndrome. I think maybe autism. I don't know.
I don't think they were that careful.
I was gonna say, was it unspecified?
No.
I don't know if it was.
It was basically like they just pulled traits and made this character that was supposed to be like, the Superman of special needs or something. And the way they, his portrayal, the way they dressed him, like everything about it was just offensive in every different way. And Tropic Thunder was supposed to be that, right? You have blackface from Robert Downey Jr. and a million other taboos that they go through. But now I look back at them and it's like, no, that's really offensive. And it does, if this is your first time seeing somebody with special needs, is Tropic Thunder, and then that's your portrayal of how they are. Plus they use the R word a lot, and it's like, and that's just offensive anyways. And even before I had autistic kids, like I never used that term and was offended by it. Yeah. Prior to that, I was just like, it's mean, it's dehumanizing. You just shouldn't do it. and there's no excuse for it. Oh, it's funny. You know, you have the crypto guys online that use, no, it's not crypto. The investor guys, the GameStop guys.
Oh, do they use it a lot?
I forget that.
I guess I'm not in that
they
world.
use it all over on X. It's like constant, and it's just like, man, I just don't care. I don't care that you don't find it offensive. Like if anybody finds it offensive, and I could prevent it by replacing it with a different word, I'll do that. I don't mind modifying my language to not upset people. But anyways,
and there's no shortage of other terms, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like they try to make it sound, it's like, oh, it's the only way to describe a situation. And it's like, no, you're being lazy and insensitive, and that's what you're doing. You could say you're doing it for whatever reason you want, but that's the effect. And so, And Tropic Thunder is a perfect example of that, where it's just like, and they go into detail about it. You know, it's like full R versus other R. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I thought it was actually super interesting for where we're going in this episode, because he references a few other movies, and I was like, oh man, I was going to talk about all those. Like it's it's almost like a decent starting point. But yeah, I thought that was actually what I was going to ask you, is if they didn't use the R word and it was just this character of Simple Jack, would it still be as offensive to you? And it sounds like, yeah. And honestly, I can agree, because when I watched that movie, and again, this is an irreverent movie. That's like the style of comedy. But when I saw the clips of Special Jack, and it was years before I was married, had kids or anything, I had like a pit in my stomach watching those scenes. I was just like, oh, this is so over the top and so painful. And I mean, in a sense, it's what they're going for. The movie's not defending these characters. It's saying, look how like messed up these actors are, that they're willing to adopt these personas and portray them in these ways. And so I don't think that the film is lauding it, but you're absolutely right that it is taking a serious situation and making it light, I suppose. And so, but I'm sure that we'll have people comment on this video, and please comment, please boost us in the algorithms, telling us what you think of Tropic Thunder.
I'm being mostly quiet right now because it's been so long since I watched Tropic Thunder that I'm only having like vague recollections of what you're describing. So it's like,
I almost want to watch the.
It might be interesting because
you should just tape yourself doing it.
If this was Joe Rogan or something, we'd be like, hey, can we pull it up?
Pull it up.
Yeah.
You got to pull it up. Yeah, right. That's exactly what would be happening.
We're not.
It's only a portion of the movie too. Yeah. No, it's it's funny, and it shifted so, I don't know, not immediately, but it was just like, I remember thinking about the movie later on after I had my son, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's actually not very nice that they did that. And then now I watch it and I'm just like, I'm very unhappy about this. I don't know. It makes you feel old. It's like, oh my gosh, am I just the older person who doesn't tolerate things anymore?
I was going to say, David knows I love The Office a lot, and The Office has a scene that's very much, I don't know if you guys remember the one I'm talking about.
I remember the cutaway with Michael. Yeah.
I don't want to say it because it probably wouldn't be good to
Should
say
we
it.
give him a pass for the R word?
No, we're not going to. You can't give me a pass.
Okay. All right. I can't.
How it works.
Can my son give you okay. Sorry. Maybe I should cut that out.
It's when he accidentally outs Oscar as being gay. And he was saying, I wouldn't have called him that if I thought he actually was. And then he uses the R word. You don't call a blank blank.
Yeah.
You call your friends blank when they're being,
Yeah.
But that's another one where I'm like, funny, but at the same time, you couldn't do that now. And there is this, even for me that loves The Office, when I watch that scene, I'm like, it's a chuckle that I'm ashamed of a little bit. So it's a sort of a weird thing.
It is. It's just comedy has a good way of doing.
And again,
that.
It's kind of like you said, though. It's not saying, yeah, it's great to say that. It's saying, look at this buffoon that would just say that. Intent with it matters a little, I think, but it definitely feels off now. It feels off.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I also think of just kids in general. I mean, my neurotypical son is 12, and it's just like the stuff that he hears and what he repeats. Luckily, I'm on TikTok all the time, so I'm like, I understand him all the time.
Yep.
But it's different because if they learn that term, actually, this is a totally different issue. But at the schools. Like they'll say the tism, or they'll say like, oh, that's autistic. And so it's almost like the word autism has now become like a variation of the R word, where it's like, oh, you're acting shy or, uncomfortable in social situations. That's the tism. And you're like,
it's kind of odd too, because I've seen that used almost in a positive way sometimes as well. Like if someone does really good on something, like, man, you got the tiz or whatever. And it's like, yeah, seriously? Like, what's happening?
Is this what's happening with people?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen that. I've seen my older kids have said things like that. So it's
I've said a touch of autism, but it was not in either of those contexts.
You look at yourself too. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I look at the stuff I do, I'm like, oh, that's a little autistic. Yes. And you kind of use it as like an adjective to describe.
The more you learn about it, the more you kind of feel like you're seeing it in places that you might not be, but you're seeing traits that are kind of like, man, maybe that's where they got that from a little bit, because I have like a small, there's a small bit of my personality that I'm seeing they've turned the volume up on it, but it's there, I
was going to say, I feel like I'm glad that you guys said that, because I've definitely noticed that with myself. I'm like, all right, once you find out that our son was autistic, I started being like, okay, so I look at myself, knowing that there's genetic components to it. I start looking at myself, and then I start looking around at my family. And I'm like, so this isn't healthy. This isn't a healthy approach.
David's like, I really like routines. Wait a second.
Well, for me, like I'm actually, I know I don't seem like it, but I'm super introverted. Like, and I grew up being super shy and just terrified of everyone, like kids and adults and any person.
I was that way as a kid.
Talking to like a cashier or asking for help to a stranger, like that was just like the most terrifying thing in the world to me. And I'm like, now I look back, I'm like, that wasn't like super normal, I would say. Like there's a level that it probably surpassed. But nobody actually recognized that stuff before. It was just the toughen up, figure it out. And that was the end of the story. So I think all the issues actually represent everybody, I think, being more sensitive to other people's experience, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, how you portray it when you write it down on paper.
Yeah.
Right.
Because even for the people who just offhandedly say something, you're like, hey, that's wrong. Oh, sorry. Let me fix that. But if it's like, no, I produced a movie about this, you're like, that's less of a pass.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, and that gets into so much of what we're going to talk about, which is that there's such an intentionality to portray characters in a certain way, and sometimes that way is accurate because it's historical. Sometimes it's perhaps a stereotype, or at the very least reinforcing a stereotype. Before we get to that, I do have a quick question I thought I would throw to you guys. In trying to like mentally list out things, which I know what Richard's thinking right now. I like lists. I like to organize things. So in that process, I came across two movies that I wasn't sure what to do with. I was like, Forrest Gump and The Water Boy. Do these count as special needs movies? What do you guys think?
That's hard.
I'm going to put you guys on.
I mean, Forrest Gump, I would say seemed a type of autism. Like if you really look at it, because you're just like, he definitely didn't think the same way as anybody else. He had fixations on things that he never dropped. I mean, there are some aspects of how he acted where you're like, that does seem a little autistic. Or even just not having the same emotional reaction, like when he saves all the guys from the battle, right? I mean, that's, there's still people out there, and he just runs back in, and I mean, that's not a typical reaction for anything. Even if you were going to do that, if you're brave enough to go do that, your reaction would not be like, yeah, whatever. Doing my job.
I'd agree with that. I think Waterboy, though, I don't know that's if we're talking about it seriously. I think he was just sheltered, right? Like he thought and acted.
Yeah.
He thought and acted like a normal person would, who had been sheltered by an overbearing mother for his whole life and lied to
and had a speech impediment.
And had a speech impediment. Right? Like he had a speech impediment.
Yeah. Yeah, I
just
agree.
wanted to play the foosball, and I don't see anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, really.
No, I agree. I mean, with Forrest Gump, I mean, he had special needs, but it didn't seem to really be super central to the character. I mean, he was oblivious, and that was like what served him so well, right? And that was his main situation, was that he was oblivious. Central to
just
his
naive,
character. naive, naive, oblivious, didn't understand what was going on, but still brave and at every central turning point in the last 50 years of history. So, pretty cool.
It's your typical like underdog story, and that's kind of the underdog part where it's like, oh, nobody expected this, and then he managed to accomplish that and do all these other things, which isn't bad, but even that is kind of unrealistic in some ways, which gets us into the whole like autism superhero,
And I think part of what might be happening there too is like, I think we get those kind of representations a lot where they're something is different about them, but look at how it makes them able to do this or that. But it's sort of, and this is a weird analogy to draw, but I hear people a lot of times saying like, I don't believe in God because, look at all the miracles it says he did in the Bible, but you don't see that all the time. And I'm like, well, that's because that's the focus of what's being written. It's interesting and it's unusual, and that's why it's written down for us in the Bible, these things that God did in history. So I think part of it too is if you want to tell a story, you want there to be something that's interesting or unusual. The problem is when the interesting or unusual is in a lot of stories, it doesn't feel unusual anymore. And then people start to think, well, that's the typical. Like, I don't know that there was like a malevolent backing to why that's the case. I think it's just like, what if there was somebody that, they have these difficulties, but because of it, they're able to do, and that's an interesting story, right? So I don't know. I don't feel like it's something where they're trying to say, everybody's like this. I think that's the point. It's a story with interesting hooks to try to get you, and this is the interesting part. But it's become such a prevalent trope that now I think people just expect that out of individuals, and it doesn't make any sense why you would. Like, it was a movie. You have to understand they were trying to show you something unusual and interesting. Yeah.
No, but it's easy for people to just generalize that because if you haven't seen it anywhere else, then you're like, oh no, I saw that, and that the Rain Man. It's one of the movies on the list, and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, he could do all these numbers in his head, and it's amazing.
Yes,
and blah blah blah. They're like, it could be a different way of thinking, which I think everybody now starts to appreciate because you see what all the same leads to, which is the movies that come out these days, where you're like, this is so boring. If there's another Marvel movie with some sky beam and the world's going to end, and I'm just going to tune out because I'm so bored with that. And so that's where the extremism stops doing its job.
Yeah.
Right. We're like, we tried to go extreme so many times. Now nobody actually cares. And that's it.
I saw people, to that point, celebrating because there was some announcement that the new Spider-Man movie is going to be street level with its threats. That's what they're calling it. And everybody's excited, like, oh my gosh, you mean there won't be some big existential threat to the entire universe? It'll be just some thugs in the street. I want to watch that, like whatever.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
Right.
Well, that's what made Daredevil so refreshing.
There's a reality to that for sure. Yeah, and that's a big part of why Daredevil was good. I think it was that way.
The original, not necessarily the Disney Plus reboot, or whatever soft
sequel.
Sequel series. That's probably the best way to put it. I'm glad you brought up Rain Man because that is I think that movie informed the way people viewed autism for probably a generation or so. They seem to pair up autism and the difficulties that the character goes through in that movie with this unique mental ability. And there are cases like this, right? And there are cases, I mean, he was based on a true character, based on a true interaction there. But, and then there's the people who have photographic memories and they can draw skylines from memory and all this kind of stuff. And just recently I saw a 2010 film, Temple Grandin. I'm curious if either of you have seen Temple Grandin.
I have not.
No.
Oh man, highly recommend. And anyone listening, if you are at all interested in this subject, it's an excellent, well done movie. It's based on a true story, true character, or true person, Temple Grandin. She was a real pioneer in terms of the livestock industry, but pretty severely autistic, and became quite an outspoken voice for the autism community. And it's just a really well done movie because it shows kind of what her thought process looks like. It's not just showing her; it's kind of showing the world from her vantage point, and tremendously honoring to people with autism. So I'd strongly recommend that one. I would say a pretty accurate illustration of her situation, right? Because that's the thing we always have to clarify. I find that a lot of these movies, I mean, I had somebody once, I was walking around with Eddie, and he's pretty visibly different. And this guy said, "Oh, is he autistic?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh man, they're the next stage in human evolution." And I was just like, okay. I don't know how to respond to that. I was like, I'm just trying to survive this trip to the pool that we were at. It's like just trying to not die.
Well, we're going to next stage ourselves to another meltdown, buddy.
Oh yeah, hang out for 10 minutes. You're going to see what this looks like.
Let me show you the not fun part of this situation, which is, quite a bit of it sometimes. But no, I love the idea of people getting some concept of how different it is. Because like my son's nonverbal. And when I say nonverbal, I don't mean like, oh, he just can't talk. I mean, he has very little connection with communication, period. Like he has maybe 10 to 20 signs. He gets the gist of what you're saying, but it's really situational. So if it's like you walk in the door and he doesn't shut the door, like if you turn around and say, "Damien, shut the door," he knows like, all right, I just walked through the door. I'm getting yelled at. I'm going to shut the door, And so that's his way to communicate. So it's almost like it's just really difficult. I compare it to like somebody going to a very foreign country that you're very unfamiliar with, and they're speaking a language and acting in a way that you don't understand. And that's what, my son's probably experiencing all the time around everybody. And that's it. And I'm like, oh man, it's hard to even relate to, because you think like, oh, if I could talk, I would learn sign, or I'd write something down, or you'd have some methods. And so, no, I love those stories because it helps. I actually read a book one time, and it was about, some end of the world apocalypse, and this autistic boy was left alone. His parents were gone, and he was wandering around with his dog that would talk to him. And it was like, and he would say things like, "Oh, I remember when I'm alone and there's nobody around, I have to go to Mr. Smith's house. Like that's where I go if this happens." And you just hear him thinking in his head. And I'm like, oh, all right. That actually puts some perspective in. Because sometimes my son will look at something and he'll be staring at something. And I'll be like, you turn around, you try to look at what he's staring at, and you're like, I have no idea what he's staring at. Or he repeats his movies a million times. I'm like, I have no idea what he's getting out of this. And they'll laugh randomly. And you're like, you just saw this 1,000 times. What's funny this time? So, any movie that could help with that, I think, makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because that's the thing is that, we could nitpick some of the sort of negative outcomes of some of these films, but ultimately, awareness is a good thing, right? Without awareness, there's so many people that would go undiagnosed, not getting the support that they need. A lot more tremendously ignorant or frustrating statements made by people in public about your child, or the adults in your life for that matter. But we can nitpick, but awareness is an important thing. And I think as well, and this isn't a movie, but I'm curious if either of you have read the book. It's called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. It's a very long title. Highly recommend. Read it in college. No. And honestly, it's also from the vantage point of an autistic boy. I think he's like 12 or so. And it's just a neat kind of viewpoint into what it's like for them to function. And I thought, wow, that is very insightful, because otherwise I'm just thinking, well, like you said, if I couldn't talk, I would write things down. This brain, without the ability to speak, would come up with these solutions. Well, the difference is it's not just an inability to speak, it's an inability to communicate. And so, same thing with our boy. And so we're already down the rabbit trail on this, and I love it. But are there any other kind of like good, bad, ugly examples that come to mind in terms of autism in film or TV, for that matter?
Let's see. The Accountant. That's actually an interesting one, because they just came out with a new version of it. And I was like, The Accountant was actually pretty interesting, because the way he adjusted his behavior to the people he was interacting with, like, oh, you said that, and so I know that I'm supposed to say this next. And he actually just had like routines for interaction. I thought that was actually pretty unique. He was also kind of a psychopath, which was less helpful. but his social was actually pretty interesting. And at first I I wasn't offended by that at all. I was just like, oh, this is a good way to explain how somebody like this would think or might behave in these situations, and how it would confuse people if you didn't, if somebody like that acted a certain way around you, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's a normal person.
Really good masking, essentially, is what it comes down to, right?
Yes. Yeah. And for some ways, I actually considered myself that same way before I kind of, went through my awakening like 3 years ago, where I was like, man, I was masking all the time. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until I was like 39 years old. And I was like, oh, this is why I couldn't connect with anybody, because I was actually masking my actual thoughts in the process. And then that's my default was like, oh, polite, friendly enough, and that was it. But I was never connecting with anybody, and now I do it all the time. It just took 39 years and giving up a whole bunch of foods and doing a bunch of junk.
I was going to say, and now you connect professionally, even over video, which I imagine for some folks on the spectrum is probably incredibly difficult. It's like, okay, so now I've reduced the nonverbal parts of interaction, the trickiest parts to read, and now I've reduced it to 2 dimensions. Like, that doesn't help at all. But yeah, absolutely. I think another character that comes to mind, Abed in Community. They never say he's well, that's not true. They say the word Asperger's is brought up once, but I loved his character because he's just one of the best characters in the show, just hands down, hilarious. But also he puts into words what some of the experiences are like, again, presumably, for an autistic person, but it's always in a comedic way. Like, he has trouble reading people's reactions, but it'll get brought up in the context of a bottle episode. He's like, oh, it's just wall-to-wall facial gestures. It's like, I may as well sit in the corner with the bucket on my head. Like, I can't process that. It's pretty great. I think, he's probably one of the more positive portrayals. And I've seen generally online that people appreciate that portrayal of autism because it's less severe, but it's still highlights the difficulties of social interaction. A slightly more.
Well, I think there's.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, there's so many we don't realize we're doing it, but all the time there's like social requirements and expectations. And when you don't meet them, that's when people have a problem. And actually, I'm from Southern California originally, and it's way more prevalent there than almost any other place I've been, where it's like in Texas, there's expectations, but there's also, grace in terms of like, oh, obviously your situation is different. So I'm going to take a step back and pause the social norms until I figure out what's going on. And then here we go. But in California, I don't know what it is. I think people are just stressed out from the traffic is my usual excuse. I'm like, man, everybody's super intolerant. And you don't know your neighbors. Like the interactions there are just not the same. And which is why we moved, a lot of times, because we're like, we need people to be tolerant and friendly and, think of the best of people prior to doing anything else. And it's not that way where I came from.
That's interesting. I would have thought it would be the opposite because you're in Texas now, but you're in town. I think maybe the difference would be if you were out in like small town or out in the country. Like, in my experience, Southern culture is very concerned with politeness and you have to say the right things. At least it was when I was coming up and when you would have been coming up too. Versus I just assume that Southern California is a lot more chill because everyone's a surfer, right?
No, everybody. Well, LA especially. Well, the problem with LA is it's just like nobody knows who's who, and everybody's trying to like climb the social ladder, and so everybody's friendly. But what they really think, because I'll take blunt rudeness over pretend kindness any day of the week. Like I would prefer to just know where you stand, and it's like impossible there because everybody will be super friendly to your face, and then who knows what they're actually thinking or saying, and it's usually not what you think, which is a pain in the butt. But it's Holly weird, Yeah. It's why our movies suck now.
There you go. All those folks are in charge now.
Well, it's just a culture, It's kind of funny because I have to watch Bachelor in Paradise with my wife. It's and after a while, Oh yeah, I don't
It's
have
part
a
of my
choice.
community service.
No, you know
agreement.
what's funny is I thought about that. I'm like, oh, would I, do I actually like watching this? And then I'm like, no, I would never turn this on if I had a choice. And so that's why I decided I have to watch it. But what's funny is you see this culture develop, and and then you could predict what's going to happen next, which is actually pretty interesting. But that's what all these movies do, is essentially setting up like a micro environment where it's like, here's how this world reacts to something, and then you get to see how people react. Problem is that it influences the real world, and then people start using the tism, or stuff, or the R word, because why not?
Yeah.
So it's touchy, but I think the more time has gone on, the better people are getting at representing the autism aspect, which is nice, especially because it's so prevalent now. I mean, in California, they say it's like 1 in 6 boys or something is autistic or diagnosed, and I think it's 1 in 20 or something. The numbers are nuts.
That was
what they're saying now.
40, but I'm sure it depends what age group. I'm not up to date on. The
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah, it goes by boys, but
yeah,
it's accelerated significantly, and I think the severe cases are accelerating too. So it's kind of like, we're probably gonna get more entertainment based on it, but hopefully they do a good job representing.
Well, I was going to say, and one sort of trope that you'll hear in response to that is, "Oh, we didn't have autism back in my day," from people in the older generation, and it's like, I mean, I get that the numbers are different now than they were, but at the same time, it's like, you did have this, but you never saw those people because they were in institutions. I mean, that was one of the early,
or kept at home.
Exactly, or kept at home. And honestly, I'm a little amazed. I didn't think to put this on my list earlier. Maybe the first portrayal of a special needs character, presumably autistic, Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh,
I mean, and that's a tremendously fascinating character, right? Because he's treated as this boogeyman in this town, but he ends up saving the day. But yeah, I mean, this is a grown man who's been kept at home, and all the kids have stories about him because of all these legends. And yeah, that's the way that it was for people with disabilities, people with special needs. I mean, it was so you wouldn't see these
terrifying.
people again. Awful.
Well, that's the thing. And the average life expectancy of autism, is like 35 or something. Like the age is not high. And it's because of all the difficulties you have, and they don't address their problems. If you don't take care of your injured foot and you let it sit like that for a year, you're going to have some complications. And so I think a lot of times, my son has like extreme pain tolerance. And so we don't even know what's happening until, oh no, he, we had this issue where he was essentially constipated, but we were not, like, my wife and I take turns taking him to the bathroom. So we didn't realize that there was a problem. And then it was like 3 days later and we're like, oh crap. And then we had to go to the hospital, and that kind of stuff happens all the time just because they can't communicate it. And they might just tolerate it because they don't know any better. So
Rory definitely has that. If he gets hurt in some way, he'll literally try to hide it because he doesn't want to do anything about it. And he'll be off to himself. And then when you finally figure it out, he's like, "Don't tell anyone else." He's weird about stuff like that. That's one of his things, that he wants that to be kept to himself only. That there was some sort of hurt, but that means he doesn't come looking for help at all. So you have to basically discover it some way or another. I wonder, talking to like the numbers seeming to go up and things like that, I wonder if part of that too is just that the criteria for diagnosis seems broader these days. Like when we're talking about it, we're mostly talking about like the more severe cases and things like that. But you see a lot of people talking about, "Oh, I was diagnosed autistic. I never knew it my whole life, and now it makes so much more sense now that I was." But those aren't really the people we're talking about per se at times. Like, we're talking about the characters that are more severe in movies and that are so different, but they are able to do these amazing, all the stuff we're talking about. I wonder if the numbers going up is a lot of different things at work. Like you're saying, they were put away before nobody saw them. You didn't really talk about it. It wasn't really diagnosed in that way. And then also, maybe there's some things that are contributing to a change in how things are developing. And then also maybe we're just broadening the criteria some, and they're including a lot more people in it. And so it just looks like a much bigger number because you're including a lot more people in it now.
Well, that is part of it, right? Because Asperger's was considered a separate condition, and ADHD
and I remember
was considered separate. Now those are essentially all considered to be part of the autism spectrum disorder. It basically, they just found that things didn't fall neatly into the categories that they thought that they did.
Yes.
And there's more awareness. There's more I'm far from an expert on why the numbers seem to be different than they were, but this does seem like it must be inevitable. That must be an inevitable component of it is that there's either greater awareness and that there are broadening, like you said, ranges that are kind of grouped into or accepted into this. Like Anthony Hopkins, right? To get back to acting a bit. Anthony Hopkins was diagnosed at 80, 70s, somewhere in that range. And he's like, oh yes, I'm autistic. I don't doubt that he is, and maybe it helped in some ways when it came to his focus for being an actor. But at the same time, if you got that far in life, then it mustn't, if you got that far before you realized that something was different, then it must have been a fairly mild situation compared to some of the people that, we're going to look at some of these other movies.
You're hearing that number of a 1 in, I don't forget what you said, 1 in 6, and you were saying maybe 1 in 40. Either way, those are big numbers. And I just wonder how much of that 1 in 6 or 1 in 40 is like your guys' kids that are very significant.
Well, they say 30% is profound. And it's, but even that, big. I mean, it's a huge number.
That's still big.
Yeah. My thing is, it's just there should be some resources for it, or maybe a research center. We spend lots of money on a lot of crap, and it's just
we do.
The fact that autism parents can't find resources, and we all have to go through this huge cycle of figuring things out. You would just think somebody would sit down and be like, "Hey, here's the checklist. Let's just check it out," and it could be a bunch of different things, but here's how we usually find it out. So I think they must be figuring it out now, but I do think there's, and this is controversial, but I think there's an environmental component to all of it, which is accelerating the rates. And, because you figure our generation, 80s is when plastics really took over. Prior to that, it was all wax paper and glass. And then we went, no, Tupperware and bags. And then we started stuffing everything into plastic. And we've had, for me, 42 years of exposure. So who knows what that does to somebody? It's never been done in history. So I don't know. It's, but any amount of attention, and that's why it's cool that it's showing up in movies more often, because now it's going to get the attention, and that's how you get the funding for hopefully finding a solution or at least assisting families.
Right.
Because
just help
you always think, because people just think of the autistic person, oh, my son, he's not going to be able to care for himself, and so he's going to be, it's really difficult for him. I'm like, no, it's difficult for any family that cares for the family member.
Yes.
We can't leave him alone for more than 10 to 15 minutes, and so you could imagine how that modified all of our lives and how everything we do kind of revolves around it. And now it's and I'm, my wife and I are still productive, but imagine if we, had more resources to help, and it wasn't, 30% of our annual budget goes towards autism services, and it's huge.
Speaking to the whole thing of, we talk about when you you're talking about good movies that have portrayed the issue, and you're saying at least you're getting a good snapshot of that one person's journey with it, because it is different. It's different for every family too. And so something I was just realizing that I have to deal with that maybe you guys don't necessarily have to deal with. Not maybe, I'm pretty sure you don't. Is Rory, I co-parent. I'm divorced with his mother, and so he's got 2 households he goes to. And if we know anything about these kids, routines and having things the way they want them to be. And so it's really different for all. And so that's a hardship that he faces that some other kids, maybe they've got a little bit better. They don't have that, discontinuity that takes place every single week for him that he has to adjust to. That's the worst couple of hours when he first comes here. And I'm sure when he first goes to her place, it's probably similar. But that's just something that our family has to navigate. And it's every family's got different things that they have to navigate with it, and it affects planning for everything you think to do. Everything.
Oh
yeah, for sure. I think
spending the night somewhere, it's oh my gosh.
Yes.
right.
What do we need to bring? Because if we forget something, it's over. It is over.
Yeah, and how far away is the exit, right? I think, Mark, I think I remember hearing you talk about this on one of your episodes, is, okay, I need to know that I can park near where we're going to be, right? Because I got to be able to get him out easily, and I need to be able to carry him to wherever we're that's the situation we're in. I need to know that I can carry him, kicking and screaming, back to the car if it calls for that. And so, this is the kind of thing, like basically, like you said, if if you have a good handle on one person's situation, then that's that one person's situation. The problem is that we generalize. That's how the human mind works. We generalize. We think, okay, you said that your child's autistic. I have a category for that. They go in the same box as Rain Man, as Temple Grandin, as whoever else. And sometimes that's helpful, right? Because it helps us maybe understand how to interact with them. Okay, maybe I shouldn't hug them. Maybe they really would dislike any type of physical touch, and so, or maybe I need to reduce the stimulants in the house, right? Because that could affect them. But at the same time, it can lead to some short-sighted interactions, right? And some less helpful statements being made. A movie that I think is pretty interesting on this front is What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I don't know if you guys saw that one. It was
it's been years and years.
Yeah.
I did watch it years and years ago.
And so it's a young Johnny Depp, right? Johnny Depp's probably 20 or so, and it's a story about him, Gilbert Grape, and his family around him. And he has a younger brother who's 18, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who is severely autistic. And actually, we'll come back to that in a moment, but it's all about how the family deals with the various aspects of their lives, one of which being their brother and child with special needs. And it shows how it weighs on the family and how it weighs on him. And it's actually really, I think, beautiful. It's kind of, it's a heavy movie, but it's a beautiful illustration of what that type of love looks like, and to try and to fail and to try again. Most of these movies we're mentioning could stand alone as a Popcorn Theology episode, and maybe we'll come back to some of them. But yeah, I think that's a really helpful illustration. And similarly, a movie like Temple Grandin, which is a little bit different in terms of the overall story, obviously, we're dealing with someone who's far more accomplished, able to live independently, whereas in Gilbert Grape, Leonardo DiCaprio's character is constantly being watched by someone. And if they get their eyes off him, he'll go climb the water tower and in tremendous danger. And so it's just that there's such contrast between the two. But if you don't watch any other part, there's a scene at the very end of Temple Grandin that really expands on even the role of parenting within, within caring for people with autism. It's really tremendous, and I won't rehash it here. But I think in both cases,
I love that.
Yeah, the representation that we see is important. And actually, the DiCaprio part makes me want to ask this question. How do you guys feel about that kind of angle of having people that are neurotypical playing severely autistic characters in film? Is that something that, we already looked at the Simple Jack example earlier. That's kind of a caricature that we'll set that aside.
How they do it matters, but sure. How they do it definitely
think?
matters either way. I don't think I see an issue with that as long as they're approaching it in the right manner. Like, that's what they're paid to do. They're actors. They play people that have weaknesses or traits or strengths or whatever that they might not have in their genuine life. That's what they're supposed to be doing. So I don't know. I've seen that kind of pushback sometimes, and I'm not sure that I really fully understand why that is. Like, wouldn't you want someone that's studied it deeply and understands it very well, but someone who's very good at acting and is trained to do that? Wouldn't you want them playing those roles? I would think. And I can see where there might be a strength sometimes in having the person in that role that actually struggles with the thing that's being portrayed. There's definitely a place for that too, but I don't think it upsets me if it's the other way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because it's how else is it going to be represented? You're not going to get an autistic person to play a different character.
Especially like severe autistic situation. Like, it's not.
Actually, well, I feel bad because I don't remember the name of the movie, but my family was invited to be in a movie that was about a mother who was losing custody of her autistic child, and it was this big thing. But we were invited to be in it, and so we're, I have to find the movie. It was
like extras?
we sit in, sort of. We were actually in one of the scenes where the parents are talking to the lawyer, and my son was actually in the room too, and he was in a different scene, and I was actually in a few scenes. Yeah. Didn't talk or anything, but the whole movie was about, the autism struggle. And I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And they managed to feature a couple of actually autistic people. And I'm like, oh, that's
right.
I do like that.
There's a place for that, for sure.
Yeah. There is. Yeah. Yeah. Probably not the main characters, but in the background, like, hey, here's Here's how it is.
Yeah. And just logistically, if nothing else, I mean, it can be grueling to make a film. And we're talking many hours on set. If we're dealing with children, there are child labor laws and considerations. And also, if you're, dealing with someone who is being vulnerable about some aspect of themselves, to throw spotlights and a camera on that, I mean, that seems a little
tough.
cruel. That's one reason, though, that movies that do include special needs actors really stand out to me, because I'm thinking that's all stuff that they had to overcome. Peanut Butter Falcon. I mean, we've got a guy with Down syndrome playing, a character in that situation, does a really good job. And, it really stood out. Another movie that I want to get y'all's opinions on it's called The Ringer. So have either of you guys seen the Johnny Knoxville comedy, The Ringer?
No.
Oh, I remember seeing the previews for it, and I was like, wow, that looks really offensive.
Okay, so absolutely. Okay, so that's the right response, right? So
that was from a South Park episode, wasn't it? Did they just copy that?
It might have been. I don't know.
Okay.
The premise. So the teaser that I first saw for this movie was a scene, just a whole scene taken out of the movie of he's in confession. This is Johnny Knoxville. If you don't know who that is,
love it. Great start. Johnny Knoxville in confession. Go on.
We're already at a good start. And he's confessing to the priest. He's like, I've done something horrible. And the priest is like, there's no sin so bad that you can't seek redemption. And he says, I've been pretending to be mentally challenged so that I can fix the Special Olympics to make money off of it. He's like, father, and then you just see a fist punch through the wall, and the priest takes him out and kicks him out of the church. That's the whole teaser that I saw, and I was like, okay, I got to see this movie. And that's exactly the premise. So that's the exact premise, is that Johnny Knoxville he's a good guy, but he's in a situation where he's trying to help his friend, and so he decides to pretend to be mentally challenged. And so they have this almost all the movie takes place in the context of a Special Olympics camp, right? And you think, this is going to go so badly. This is so horrible. I can't believe they made this movie. It's actually ridiculously honoring of people with special needs. And it's just such an ironic thing. I strongly recommend it, because what he's finding out is, one, these people are far different than I expected. And two, they're tremendously talented, and it just shows a lot of the humanity in these characters. And many of the actors actually have special needs as well, various situations, various conditions. But yeah, again, in a comedy, it's like, man, this is a risky movie to make, because this could have gone south so many different ways.
That's one of those things I think we have to consider.
But I just found it. I was like, this is actually I thought a very honoring film. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, that's something you have to consider when you're thinking about, on its face, the premise of that. And I haven't seen it, so if it's actually terrible, I'm just going off your word that it's not. So right to David if it's that terrible. Movie. But I think there is a place. There is a place for movies where a character has bad attitudes towards something, or is doing something that's not, but they're able to grow, and the movie takes them on. I think we're quick sometimes to toss something out without thinking, what are they trying to get at with it? Where is the movie going to land this plane at? It doesn't really matter where it takes off from. Where's it going to land it at? And I've seen that with other issues before. I've heard people that struggled with infertility and things like that, and they'll talk about a movie like Juno and not like that at all, because there's a scene where the dad is or some parent, I forget the context of Juno, is pressuring, get an abortion, and they are so upset about that. And I'm like, but the movie winds up, I feel pretty clearly saying that was not right, that the dad was doing, So I feel like you have to be able to navigate that sometimes. And I think it gets hard when something you're emotionally charged on. Sometimes you'll just see the offensive part and not see okay, but where is it going? Because stories have offensive parts. They've got people that are people. That's Jesus told parables, and he had people mugging people and robbing people, and that's not right either. But where did it land? Where did the plane land? What was the point of the story? Where was it going? It sounds from your description of The Ringer that might be that kind of story. But I'm not willing to put my stamp of approval on it. I
was really banking on one of you having seen that one back in my play on.
I was talking about the South Park episode, because that was basically the entire concept, was that Eric Cartman was going to join the Special Olympics and then he'd win all this money.
That made me even better.
Well, what was funny was that what it does is it shows the personality of the special needs people. And I think it's easy to box everybody up into oh, you're special needs, so you're just going to act like this, and that's who you are. And if you've dealt with a lot of special needs people, you'll realize that no, they're just like any person. Exactly. Maybe even more expressive than a lot of people, because most people put themselves in a box. But like if you're special needs, it's like, here's who I am, you know, and you're just trying
deal
to
with it.
deal with it. Damien, put your pants back on. You know, it's you have those issues like, hey, I'm comfortable here.
Exactly.
I'm fine. And so it's, but I think that's way more humanizing when you do show like, no, you might have this expectation of like special needs and it is something totally different. And all these people are just different and they all have their own preferences and, you know, and personality flaws. Some of them are kind of jerks, just like any person could be kind of a jerk. That happens. So it's like my son laughing at me when I am mad at him. You know, he'll just be like, oh, you're in trouble. You know, he takes his remote and he'll peel off all of the buttons. So he ruins the remote, but then he can't use it. And so I'll be like, Damien, stop doing this. And he'll laugh. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a teenager.
It's funny. Yeah. It's funny how they present their anger differently sometimes, like or their rebellion or whatever, because you do still see it. Like with Rory, he incorporates his fixation, whatever that might be at the time. So lately it's been natural disasters. He loves learning about natural disasters, and is obsessive about like how are they formed, where are they, where do they happen most. But he was mad. I don't even know why he was mad at me the other day. But I'm trying to tell him go to bed, and he's not going to bed. And he was mad at me about something, and I couldn't even figure out what it was. But just, I'm mad at you, Dad. You're so mean. And I didn't do anything. I don't know what it was. But he finally says to me, he says, I'm going to move somewhere on the other side of Oklahoma so that if you want to visit me, you'll have to drive through Oklahoma. And you know what's in Oklahoma? Tornadoes. There's going to be a lot of tornadoes. You're going to have to drive through those tornadoes. And I was like, and I remember the moment I laughed because it was so ridiculous. And I was like, you know what? I guess I'm driving through tornadoes because I'm going to visit you. He's like, well, you're going to have to. And it was funny. The next day I came home from work and he comes over and he's being real quiet, just standing next to me. And he never apologizes. But he just out of nowhere, he's like, I guess I won't live on the other side of Oklahoma. I guess I'll just still live somewhere close. But that was just that was how he was going to express himself, that he was upset about something I had said or done. And I still don't know what it was. But that's just, he does stuff so like that all the time. That exact sort of thing. He's very creative with his that's hilarious. Insults that he throws. I don't know if it'll call them insults, like scenarios that he throws at you. What he paints quite a picture. Yes, this is like this is sort of like a Bond villain sort of monologue he's doing. At this point, there's going to be a pit with sharks with lasers on their head. You know, that's what it felt like. So
no, well, what you're seeing is like, oh, it's kind of neurotypical, where you're just like, oh yeah, I can see a kid saying that, or you know, just another person saying that. We see that sometimes. We're like, oh yeah, you're acting kind of like a punk, like a normal teenager. Like that's actually encouraging. Yeah, and I love the personality stuff. When he has a preference for something, I'm like, oh yeah, let's find out what that is.
It might be frustrating at times, but it's also, I know what you're saying. Like, you're like,
yeah, I'm just
that's
like,
good
oh,
though.
This is great.
That's good. You expressed something here. So,
yep. No, that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, we in the interest of time, we're going to probably start to wrap things up here a little bit. But I did want to try and hit some highlights, because one thing that I find is that when we talk about movies with an underlying theme, like special needs, there tend to be underlying repeated sort of, maybe not tropes, but trends that we can see within those stories. And I'm just curious if you guys think that these are on par with some of the ones that we've seen so far. There tends to be an emphasis in movies featuring these characters on innocence, right? We're dealing with people who are innocent in a world that is otherwise broken. Typically, they're either adults or they're, at least in contrast to people their age, seen as more innocent. Additionally, there tends to be an element of joy in movies about special needs characters. And I think that's pretty interesting as well, that despite their limitations, they have this happiness. I can't help but think of Shane Gillis. I don't know if you guys are familiar. He says he's got family members with Down syndrome, and people always ask, oh, how are they doing? He's like, they're doing better than everyone else I know.
Yes.
I say that too about my son. I'm like, he's one of the happiest people I know. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel bad for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Compassion's great, but you don't need to, treat them like they could go at any time or something like that. Additionally, like one thing that we see is usually in these movies that there are people mistreating a person with special needs, and then others who step in to defend them, difficulty making friends. And honestly, this just points, I think, to an incredibly important biblical concept, which is compassion, that compassion is extended to these people. And in a sense where a world is otherwise shaming them or treating them as other. And especially in kind of coming of age kids movies, this is so, it's already so central. But it actually reminded me a lot of, just briefly read Matthew 5. So we've got the Beatitudes, right? The first 12 verses of Matthew 5. I just couldn't help but think of this, if I can find it, in the context of special needs movies, right? Because we see that it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the lowly or the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, they'll receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." And again, I think that there's something beautiful in that we see that there is blessing in the midst of those challenges and those difficulties the characters have. And again, it's true to life. I would argue as well that we can know that even if this life is difficult, right? We hunger, we thirst for righteousness, for justice. And even if we never see justice realized this side of eternity, that we know that we will in the age to come, right? But you guys mentioned earlier, family, right? We were talking about how difficult this situation can be for families. And there's some trends associated with that in these films as well. I mean, I'm trying to think of other examples besides What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Can you guys think of any other movies that portray autism, families, anything like that?
There's actually not a lot.
I mean, there's ones you can think of that are kind of obscure. Like you mentioned earlier, there's something about Mary and how that kind of has a little bit of that dynamic to it.
It does.
Not the coming to grips part, but just showing like how the family bond that's created and things. There's some smaller pictures like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's but overall, I think just any portrayal of the experience is helpful, because I think it's so easy to forget about the family, the support system around the person, because everybody thinks, it must be so difficult being autistic, and it's like, well, if they have a good family, it's probably not that bad for them. They might be like, I could tell my son is frustrated sometimes because he's not getting what he wants or he can't communicate what he wants. But for the most part, he's the most taken care of person in the family.
Right.
And for us, we've actually, we try to do the same thing for my other son, because we didn't want him to resent my autistic son. So we're like, we better put as much effort into you that we do into him. And so I went to a goat training camp 2 weeks ago because my son's going to show goats for 4-H. And so
I was confused where the goat training was.
We found that the same principles can apply to your children. So we just go to the goat training.
So I go to the goat training
as a goat.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, my autistic son was in the goat pen. No, that's terrible. But we do spend a lot of time, because we were just like, and you have to, because if you don't also, and you have to care for each other. I mean, it's a ton of work all around. But I will say, just personally, like, I don't think I will have reached the level of kind of, spiritual, emotional, and relational development that I've reached if it wasn't for my autistic son, because I wouldn't have had to. I would have been fine like I was. So there's a lot of benefits too. And I talk about that a lot on my show.
Yeah, you do. And I really love that your show has such a positive tone, because I think when it was first recommended to me, I was like, I don't know if I want to listen to that. I was just going through a hard time. And I was like, I don't think I want to hear about other people's hard times. But
one hard time's enough.
Yeah, I'm good. But no, I love that it's about the lessons that are learned in that process, right? The trials that we go through, that the Lord works through in order to draw us closer to Him and to grow us, right? Forged through the fire in so many ways, and that whether it's good or bad, children reveal so much about ourselves, right? If you don't think you're selfish, wait till you have kids.
Exactly. Well, and that's why a lot of people who, I mean, there's so many people not having kids now. You know, if you really look at it, we're in a massive population decline and nobody's talking about it. Like, it's not going to affect things. I'm like, it's already affecting things. There's schools shutting down because they don't have enough kids. Like, we're headed for a very difficult situation. But that's why it's, you know, it's supposed to be difficult. If you're a Christian, if you read the Bible, this is not heaven. It was never intended to be. All the evil that you see is part of the system, and it's all supposed to help us grow. So that's why it's around. It's not that it can't be, you know, that it's not part of the design. And that's why it's kind of like, I think that's why we go through these things and why we get these opportunities with our children to grow. Because otherwise you're just going to be a, you know, lonely, selfish jerk. Not that any of us would have ended up like that, but if you really went with the me first perspective, which a lot of people do, that's where you end up.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, you know, kind of jumping back to the trends that we see in these movies, we see that the value of life and it is so much on display, right? That we see it's easy for people to dismiss these individuals that have, you know, especially profound disabilities that can include profound autism. And one of the things that we see in these movies, again, that points to the image of God within the filmmakers, is that they are illustrating the value of the life of people that, you know, you could argue are the least of these, right? You know, that sounds bad to say someone's less, because it's not a statement of quality. It's a statement of their trials or their status. And it reminds me of Matthew 25, 31 through 46. This is in the passage where Jesus separates the sheep from the goats. We see, you know, that he's calling some and saying to them, inherit the kingdom, which is prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, you clothed me. Sick, you came and visited me. In prison, you came to me. And so these are statements of the least, right? Because it's what it says later is that they'll answer saying, when do we see you hungry or feed you or thirsty or give you something to drink? And he says, when you did it to the least of these, you did it unto me. And, you know, I just think that is one of the things that these movies do a really good job illustrating, is that if you care for those who are affected, oppressed, you know, whatever term you want to use in life, that not only are you extending compassion to someone who bears God's image, you're actually showing a love for Christ in that moment. And so when we see films that illustrate that well, I find that to be just a great encouragement, a great talking point, and it can help us start to have those gospel conversations. And that's a big part of what, you know, Popcorn Theology is all about.
I love that. Well, and the cool part too is it shows those opportunities too, because a lot of people might think like, oh no, I don't want to give them attention because that'll make them feel less than, or we have these ideas where it's just like, no, that's an opportunity to do good. And now, you know, now I'm older, that's what I look for constantly. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an opportunity to do good. Yeah, you could have my seat, you know, here's some way I could be helpful. And now they're just opportunities. The problems become opportunities, you know, jump out of a car to help a car crash victim. We did that last year.
Dang.
Yeah. And it was like, oh wow, this is great. And luckily my wife's on the same page with that kind of stuff too. So it's just like, we constantly look for those opportunities, and it's, awesome. You know, it's the best way to be.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and there's so many reasons to not do that. So many excuses that you can make to not help people. And ultimately, if we just picture that person that needs help, that person who's asking for money, you know, is actually Christ, you know, in disguise, if you will, as another human being, that I think really changes the perspective. I wanted to ask you guys something real quick as we're wrapping up here. So you know how a lot of movies about autistic people portray them as having superpowers, right? Unique abilities.
Yep.
Rain Man can count cards. Temple Grandin can see the world like Tesla. You know, the idea is that, oh, they're the next stage in human evolution, like I said before. Yep. I noticed that those movies, like Richard said earlier, they tend to be very, you know, there's a draw to them. There's an appeal to something that is perhaps different just in and of itself. Can you think of any reason why we might find those stories appealing. Like anything that would draw us to stories about someone who is struggling but has those unique abilities that make them stand out despite the struggle.
Oh, I love those because a lot of people don't realize, but the differences that you see in each other are all opportunities to learn, right? It's like, and that's why it's galls me so much that there's not more attention on autism, because I'm like, this is obviously a divergence from typical human thinking. If we could understand what this is and what it means for our physiology, for our environment, for all these different things, we could learn massive amounts of information. And instead, they're kind of treated like it's just this inconvenience that it's outside of normal. And so it's the more you could say, hey, the differences are the good parts. Those are the opportunities for us to grow to be more, everybody to grow to be more than what we are. Then now we should be looking for them all the time. We shouldn't be poo-pooing them or, hey, go away, you're not typical. It should be, no, let's bring this front and center. There's actually a book series I read where they had, it's another sci-fi, of course, but there's a society on Venus, and on Venus, they would actually take their Down syndrome individuals, and they would be promoted to like the highest, basically, consultants of the government, because they were the most honest, and they were able to had the most empathy for everybody. And so they were actually called upon to give advice on policy. And I was like, that's incredible. Why don't we do that?
That's interesting.
I think part of it too might be like there's this desire and stuff, because we're made in God's image. So there's certain things that are reaching out for the things of the Lord. And I think one of the things we could be maybe seeing in that a little bit, maybe might be kind of two things at once there. One, like we think about the way that God entered into human history as a person, and how much he had to lessen himself to do that. And yet he had these he was God in the flesh anyway. And so it's like this unexplainable power or ability in a package that doesn't make sense. And that might resonate with us because that's what the incarnation was. But then on top of that too, I think it's perhaps like we have this innate understanding that sin is a thing. And there seems to be like this little bit of a push of, we tend to think of some of these individuals, especially Down syndrome. I know we look at it that way a lot of times, as maybe not struggling with sin the way that we do, or like, and that can't be the case. They're human just like we are. So I'm sure that's not the case. But there's even my daughter and I, our favorite band together, we talk about all the time is 21 Pilots, and they have a song that's older that never got much play, but it's called Ruby, and it's him singing about a girl in his church that had Down syndrome that he would always look forward to interacting with when he would go to church, because she was so pure and so joyful all the time. And in the song, he even starts singing like he's upset about how his own sin in his life. He's like, tell our dad I'm sorry. Like feeling like she had this closer relationship to God because she was different from him in that way. And it's almost like we might have built a little bit of a myth around it, perhaps a little bit.
Yeah.
But there is something to it. Like you see that joyfulness, that innocence, and not really life doesn't get them down kind of personality that a lot of those individuals have. And I think we might be drawn to that sometimes too, is like man, like that's almost what we're all supposed to be like. Why aren't we all like that? There might be something attractive to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think just the boldness and honesty with yourself, because I think we all have trauma and experiences that modify, or that we self-modify our behavior so that doesn't happen again.
Yep.
And a lot of them don't have that. I know my son Damien doesn't have any filters with the things that he does. And so it's like, man, that's like real honest living.
Right.
Instead of,
and it's almost like it's not the lack of having sin. It's that it doesn't affect them in the same ways that it affects us, maybe. So they don't see it the same way. And that's an interesting way to look at it too.
Yeah, they're not hiding behind fig leaves, right? They're not pulling an Adam and Eve. They're just like, this is the situation. There's a refreshing honesty there. And I think that innocence, right, that we see, and again, like we're really not trying to paint with broad brushes here. We're trying to observe larger trends, right? Because we understand that there are tons of differences here. So for anyone who's maybe fuming at, we understand. Trust us, we understand the trials and the difficulties there too. But there does seem to be this sense of this innocence, right? And I love seeing that in my son, that things don't affect him the way that they might affect other kids, and that when I screw up, he tends to be quick to forgive, quick to forget my mistakes, and that is such a blessing, I think, to both of us, for sure. Another thing that it really makes me think of is, why is it that we're drawn to stories like this? Actually reminded a little bit here, 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong. And I think there's just something that we love in a good underdog story, right? Mark, you mentioned this earlier, the classic underdog story, the hero's journey even, that there's something about the weak shaming the strong, the foolish shaming the wise, that reflects the gospel, and that reflects the, not just Christ's sacrifice, but also the fact that 12, less educated, I guess 11 ultimately, of those who followed him, less educated fishermen, tax collectors, just the, bottom rung of society, changed the entire planet and, spread the gospel, and that we're part of that heritage, right? As children of God and as believers in Christ. There's something about that I think is just beautiful. It's just tremendous.
I think God has a really strong sense of humor, and subverting expectations is probably like the, he's like a tease. It's like, I gotcha. Oh, you thought it was going to go like this, huh? And then I've experienced that so many times in my life where I'm like, man, all of my plans are just demolished most of the time. And I think that's part of it. And it's like, there you go. You never know what you're going to get. Makes it way more interesting, which has always been my driving, aspect of my life. Interesting stuff. And I'm never disappointed.
There you go.
Tired
all the time, right? Yeah, for sure. Now, the only issue I see, like if we look back at that, idea of special needs people having superpowers, right? So I think one of the drawbacks, right? We see that there's all of this imagery, I think, to the gospel. There's all of this, but as we mentioned earlier, there are some drawbacks, right? That people will assume, because someone's, is autistic, that they must have these things. Well, what happens when they don't, right? What happens when you have a movie? Again, What's Eating Gilbert Grape is a good example, and there are others as well, where you have a character who is got trials and difficulties, and there's innocence and there's beauty there, but they don't have superpowers, right? They're not counting cards. They don't have these unique hidden abilities. They're just like us. Like, that doesn't mean that they're less than. They're still created in the image of God. There's nothing about them that makes them less deserving of our love, respect, affection. And so I just think that, once again, to beat the drum of this again, when you watch a movie or read a story or an article or an inspirational video on social media, remember, that's one person's story. It doesn't apply to every other person with autism, every other person in that situation. That's probably one of my biggest gripes, my biggest frustrations with the world right now, is that we generalize so much that it can, it can be very limiting. So
I will say it's kind of a double-edged sword a little bit, too, though, because one of the things I saw when I was thinking about recording this episode and I was reading a few articles and things is almost every movie that did have a portrayal of this sort of thing, one of the critiques was it shows them like this, and that's not every person's story.
Right.
And I'm like, well, to show anyone, you have to show something that's not everybody's story, because what you are saying is that it's so nuanced that really everybody's got their own severity of this or that, trait that might be prevalent or not, or this nuance or that nuance. So like, it's difficult because on the one hand, you don't want the same portrayals all the time. So people think, oh, this is what autism is. But on the other hand, we get so frustrated with it that really there's no winning because any portrayal is not going to be indicative of the whole of autism, because it can't be. That's literally what we're saying. I kind of go back and forth with that. Like, some of them might not be helpful because we go to the same tropes so much that people start to think that's the way. But at the same time, they're also unique. They're also unique. They're going to have nuances that are so unique and so specific that the character should have things that's very specific to them. They do need to have that. So,
well, and honestly, I think any awareness is usually good awareness. Yeah. I mean, there could be, of course, bad things you could say that people could take from it, but overall, I'd say just including them in the conversation, in the situation that we all live through, is positive for the whole community most of the time. So I hope there's more,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great note to end. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this jumbo length episode up. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
And where can people find out more about the Dads in Autismland podcast?
The website's the best, dadsandautismland.com. Coming out with like an episode a week. I'm actually about to launch a series that's like a solo series. I call it Guide to Autismland, where I'm basically going to touch on the stories that all the dads have talked about, and then just with a central theme like diagnosis or day-to-day life or, all that kind of fun stuff. So that's coming out soon.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
I'll look forward to that. And then also YouTube audio podcast apps as well.
Yep.
So
everything's on there.
If you're more the audio side, you can still find it there too. Perfect. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for joining. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us for this discussion in the lobby. Check us out on popcorntheology.com. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, like, share with a friend, share with a family. Those who have family members with special needs, anyone that you think might benefit from this discussion. And also, don't forget to share Mark's podcast with them as well. In the meantime, everyone, keep engaging movies and media from a godly worldview, and remember that you are not a mindless consumer.
Thank you for joining us in the lobby for this discussion. To hear the rest of the conversation and for other content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. Donating at least $1 a month lets you vote on future episodes and get special access and bonus content. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.